Good afternoon, everyone. I am Navis Saxena, Program Manager in Visual Studio. I've been working on XAML technology for a few years now. And today, we are going to talk about building XAML universal applications in Visual Studio. So let's take a quick look at the agenda. It's pretty straightforward. I'm going to give a quick overview of universal apps, and then we will deep dive into demos. We will see a lot of demos, a lot of cool features that we have added in Visual Studio to support universal applications. And finally, in the last 10-15 minutes, we'll do an open Q&A where I would love to answer any tooling questions around universal applications or any XAML tooling questions in general for Windows 8.1 or Windows Phone 8.1 applications. So let's get started. I'm pretty sure you all must have seen the keynote, and you have seen the universal app demo in the keynote. We are releasing a new platform for Windows Phone 8.1, which is now converged with Windows 8.1, and that's super exciting. If you look at the convergence stack, it's around 90%. What does that mean? It means that 90% of the APIs that exist on Windows are also available on Windows Phone, and vice versa. Given that, there is a small set of APIs which are specific to the platform. There are some APIs which will just work on Windows 8.1, and some APIs which will just work on Windows Phone 8.1. Also, as a developer, when you will build your applications, you will create two different application packages. One application package for Windows 8.1 and one for Windows Phone 8.1 that will get loaded in the store. Having a converged platform is super exciting for developers. Why? Because it enables them to build applications by sharing significant amount of code between them. And this is where the concept of universal apps comes in. So what are universal apps? Universal apps enable developers to build applications on Windows 8.1 and Windows Phone 8.1 using shared projects. Universal apps are supported for C#, C++, and JavaScript. And pretty much most of the features which I'm going to go and demo today will work for all the three languages. How you can create a universal application? You can go and start with a new set of project templates that we are shipping as part of Visual Studio Update 2 RC. Or if you already have an existing Windows 8.1 application, you can take that forward to also run on Windows Phone 8.1 using universal apps. And we will look at both these ways in our demos. So now actually, let's switch to Visual Studio. After installing the Visual Studio Update 2 RC, if you want to bring up the new project dialog, you will see that the node structure, the language node structure in the new project dialog has changed a little bit. We now have a store apps node, and under the store apps, we have three different nodes: universal apps, Windows apps, and Windows Phone apps. If you want to go and build an application targeting both the platforms, Windows 8.1 and Windows Phone 8.1, then you should start with a universal app project template. Every project template under this node is targeting both the platforms. If you go to Windows app nodes, here, all the project templates here are targeting Windows 8.1. These project templates are pretty much same to what we shipped as part of Visual Studio 2013 RTM. If you go to Windows Phone apps node, here we have a set of templates that you can use to just create a Windows Phone 8.1 application or Windows Phone Silverlight application, which are some of the templates are listed here, which are just targeting Windows Phone Silverlight. Today we are going to talk about universal applications, so I will go to universal and create a universal project template. Now here you have two options when you're creating an application, a blank app and a hub app. If you want to go and start something from scratch, plain vanilla, you should start with the blank app project template. If you want to go and use the converged hub control for your application, then you can also start with a hub app universal template. Also, hub app universal template is a good way to actually see how your universal app is structured. It has all the three projects, and it gives you good examples of using hash if, how to do if, def, and everything in your code. So you can use that as a sample as well to see how a universal app works. So for now, I'm going to just create a universal hub app. Let me call this as demo hub app and create it. Once my project is created, now let's collapse this and just focus on Solution Explorer for a few minutes and see what is going on here. So inside the universal app, the very first node inside the solution is a folder, which is called Demo Hub App. It's a solution folder which we create by default to put all the 3 projects which are related to each other together at one place. It's an optional folder, so if you don't like it, you can remove it, and none of the functionalities in the tooling will be impacted by that. Inside the solution folder, there are 3 different projects: Demo Hub App Windows, Demo Hub App Windows Phone, and a shared project. The Windows and Windows Phone project, think about these as the platform-specific project. Right? These are the projects which are responsible for creating the application package targeting that platform. And the shared project is the new project format that we are introducing as part of Visual Studio Update 2 RC. Right? What is a shared project? It's essentially a container of all the files which gets automatically imported by both the platform-specific project. So if you go and expand your Windows project and go into references, you will see that it says my Windows project is actually importing my shared project. The icon is a little bit different because it's an MS-build import instead of a reference. Similarly, you will see something similar in a Windows Phone 8.1 project as well, which is saying that it's importing the shared project. So now the question is, what will live in my platform-specific project and what will live in my shared project? So if you go and bring up the Add New Item dialog in Visual Studio for the shared project, so let me just close this magnifier, and I will bring up the Add New Item dialog here. You will notice that we pretty much support every item type inside the shared project. So very obviously, you can put your code files, your CS files. For C++, you can put up your CPP file, your header files inside the shared project, and you can share your code between the 2 applications. Your media content, so your JPEGs, your PNG images, your audio file, your video file, all those can also be put up inside the shared project and while you are building a universal applications. If you are building an application, you should think about localization. With Convergence, both Windows and Windows Phone support the same localization technology, and so you can create a shared resources.resw file, as I'm doing this in the template, and then have a same resw file and use the same strings in both the applications, and that can also stay in the shared project. Even when you're working on the UI stack, when you're working on XAML, there are a number of cases where you can actually share your XAML as well. Right? The application object is converged between the platform, and so I have my app.xaml here inside the shared project. When you're working on your applications targeting both the platforms, I'm pretty sure that you would love to have a consistent user experience for your app on both platforms. So your brushes, your color resources, your styles, your control templates, your data templates, all of these can actually be put up inside a shared resource dictionary which can live in this shared project. Finally, you can create some reusable components like user controls, which you can abstract a bunch of XAML inside a user control and then reuse them inside the pages in individual platform projects. And you will see that example in one of my demos. So the pretty much message is shared project supports all item types. It's really up to you how you're going to go and structure your application. So what lives in the platform-specific project? If you expand the project, the very first thing is references, right? So if you want to go and reference an extension SDK, the extension SDK story is there are still 2 different extension SDKs that developers will be shipping, one targeting Windows 8.1 and one targeting Windows Phone 8.1. So you have to go and add reference to the specific extension SDKs in the platform projects. Once you have added the reference to the SDKs, you can consume those types inside the shared project, and that will work. So you can also go and add the reference to binaries, WinMDs in the platform-specific project, and then start using those types in the shared project. Some of the assets, right? So in Windows, there's a concept called MRT. What does it stand for? Modern Resource Technology. What MRT does, it actually goes and uses the assets in the application package based on the scale factor of the device it's running, right? With Convergence, phone is also supporting MRT. But because of the differences in the form factors, the scale factors supported by Windows Phone are slightly different from what exists on Windows. In Windows, the supported scale factor are 100, 140, and 180, whereas Windows Phone also supports scale factors like 120, 160, 200, 220, 240, etc. So if you are creating some scale factor specific assets, it might be useful to put them in your platform specific project because some of these scale factors will not be applicable for the other platform. And finally, XAML pages. When you're working on your UI stack and you're writing your XAML, if you're putting up your XAML pages inside the shared project, you need to make sure that your UI is adaptive to work on all different set of form factors that Windows is targeting, from a 4-inch device to a 4.5, 5-inch, 6-inch, to a tablet, to a PC, to a desktop, right? You need to make sure your UI works across all these form factors. So you need to have some way of doing some adaptive layout at runtime. Also, if you end up actually optimizing your application and UI for a specific form factor, in some cases, you will also end up putting your XAML pages in the individual platform projects and basically share your code and bunch of XAML, but in some specific pages and everything, you will end up putting in your platform projects. So that's the structure of the new project template as we have seen. Now, what about if I already have an existing Windows 8.1 application? So let's actually go and take a look at that. To do that, I'm going to use this Contoso Cookbook application. Some of you must have already seen this app. This app was published by Microsoft as a part of Windows 8.1 training kit. So let's go and run this application. It's a cookbook application, which is using the Converged hub control. It has different sections. I can go and click on a section, and it brings up a set of recipes for a particular cuisine. I can click on a recipe, and it shows the ingredients and directions to prepare that recipe. I can right-click on this page, and it brings up the command bar with a couple of commands, which I can use either to pin the recipe or to set a reminder for a recipe. If you go to the settings charm, you will see that I have some settings which are specific to my application. I can click on About, which tells me that I can go and buy the full version of this application for $13. Also, I have preferences where I've added some property which is specific to my application. So basically, it's a full-fledged Windows 8.1 application, and now we will migrate this to also run on Windows Phone 8.1 using Universal Apps. So let's do that. So the very first thing I'm going to do is I will right-click on this project and say Add Windows Phone 8.1. So when I click on this command, Visual Studio prompts a confirmation dialog, and it tells me that as part of executing this command, it's going to go and add a Windows Phone 8.1 and a shared project in the solution. So I'm going to say OK. So once they are added, we have a structure which was similar in the project templates, two platform-specific project and a shared project. After adding the shared project and Windows 8.1 project, the next step would be to start moving all the files and assets and code that I expect to be shared between the platforms inside the shared project. So I'm going to go and select my set of files. I will cut them, and then, oops, it didn't happen. Let's try it again. So I'm going to select these files, cut them, and then paste them in the shared project. This is one way of moving. Cut and paste is one way of moving your files between the projects. You can also use drag, which is basically to create a copy of a file between the projects. You can also use gesture of shift drag, which is to move a file between the projects, and all these will work in Visual Studio. So let's take a look at it, what is inside the shared project. If you look into the common folder, I have my navigation helper.cs, right? So the navigation stack is converged between the platforms, and hence my navigation helper is inside the shared project. The suspension manager is also inside the shared project because the process lifetime management is now converged between Windows Phone 8.1 and Windows 8.1. Also, all additional helper classes like observable dictionary, relay command, etc. My data model, my sample data, is inside the shared project as well. And all the assets, all the images that I'm using in my application, everything has been placed inside the shared project. And finally, some XAML files. My application object, I was talking about a shared resource dictionary, which is resources.xaml, where I've created some style, resources, data templates, and I'm sharing between the two platforms. And finally, a user control, which abstracts out a bunch of XAML, and I'm using that user control in the section page itself. Now I have created some UI, which is specific to my Windows Phone project, so I'm just going to go and add them. Since my app.xaml is already there, I don't need these files, so I will delete it, and instead go and add all these files inside my Windows Phone project. Now, once I have everything done, I will go, and the next step is to build my solution. So as part of build, I'm getting some errors. So let's take a look at it, what exactly these errors are. So if I double-click it, the error is coming from my shared app.xaml.cs, and it's complaining about settings pane. The settings option that we saw in Windows 8.1 application, this settings pane type is specific to Windows 8.1, and it doesn't exist on Windows Phone 8.1. I can still use it inside my shared project, but I need to wrap it inside a conditional if-def statement. So if you go to your Windows project and bring up the properties, and go to the build properties, you will see that we have defined a new conditional compilation constant called Windows_app for universal applications. You can continue using NetFX core to differentiate your CLR, but we recommend using Windows_app and Windows_for_app to differentiate your views when you're working in a universal application. So I'm going to go and put this inside a if-def check. So I will say #if Windows_app, and put this and if. Also, the place where this command is getting hooked up, I'm going to go and put that also inside the if-def check. So I'm going to say #if Windows_app #and if. And that's pretty much it. Let's go and build the solution again. Okay, so it looks like it did build successfully. Let me do a rebuild. Okay, and it builds fine. The next step would be to go and change the startup project to Windows Phone and run this application. To do that, I'm going to go to the debug target dropdown and change my startup project. So while you are building your universal application, we expect that you will be frequently switching your application startup project between Windows and Windows Phone to make sure your application still continues to work correctly on both the platforms. So what we have done here is added a quick and easy way for you to change the startup project when your Solution Explorer is not open, and you can just go to one location, debug target dropdown, and change the startup project. This particular feature is not only supported for the Converged Windows 8.1 and Windows Phone 8.1 platform, but it's actually supported for all stored platforms. So even for Windows Phone 8, Windows Phone Silverlight, Windows 8, this debug target dropdown is going to be supported. And it is enabled when you have more than one application project in the solution. So I've just ran the application, and you will see that my same XAML app, which was running on Windows 8.1, is now working on Windows Phone 8.1 as well. I can go into each section of the hub control. I can click on a cuisine. It shows me a set of recipes. I can click on a recipe. It shows me ingredients, directions, and it works, right? So pretty much the same application is now working on my Windows Phone. Now, if I click on the back button, my application exits. And this is not the recommended UX for a Windows Phone application, right? So we need to understand that the back button handling between Windows and Windows Phone is slightly different. In a Windows 8.1 application, you do the navigation using a software back button, which you put as a part of your page, and then use that to actually control the navigation of your pages inside the application. In Windows Phone 8.1, you need to make sure that your application responds to the back button which exists, the hardware back button that exists on the device. And to do that, we need to write a little bit of code. So I'm going to go inside my common navigation helper. And inside the constructor here, I will start using IntelliSense. So I will say windows.phone.ui.input.hardwarebuttons. So as I'm typing in the IntelliSense, you will see some yellow warning icons. What these indicate that these particular APIs are specific to a platform, right? As an example, the tooltip clearly mentions that the back pressed event is only exists on Windows Phone 8.1 and is not supported on Windows 8.1, right? So I can still go and use these APIs, but as I mentioned before, you need to put it inside a if-def statement. You also get the similar set of warnings in while you are working in XAML editor as part of XAML IntelliSense. So I will say this dot. I've already created an event, so I'm going to wire it up and then put this inside a if check. And put this into a hash and if. Also, as a good developer, when my page is getting unloaded, I will go and remove this event. While you're working in the editor, you will see at the top in the navigation bar, we have added a context switcher, right? What this is the context switcher which actually drives the IntelliSense experience in the editor, right? So if you go and set your context to Windows, which is your Windows project, you will see that #if for Windows Phone is disabled. And at this point, you will get full Windows 8.1 IntelliSense in the editor. If you go and change this to Windows Phone, my Windows #if is now Windows Phone #if is now enabled, and I will get full Windows Phone 8.1 IntelliSense. A good thing to remember is that this particular context switcher is not per document, but every document inside the shared project will respect this context switcher, right, including the XAML files. So if you go and change your context to Windows Phone, every file inside the shared project, including your XAML files, will move into the Windows Phone context. So I have my context as Windows Phone. Now I will go and open my shared user control. And I will move into horizontal view. And it's also in my Windows Phone context, as you can see in the nav bar, right? So one new thing that we have done in Visual Studio Update 2 RC is we have added a nav bar for XAML as well, right? So the very first combo box that we are seeing is the context switcher, which I have already explained, and you can use this to actually see how your UI will look on Windows versus Windows Phone. The other two combo box are element and attribute combo box. So based on the how you can use them, it's basically this nav bar will allow you to quickly navigate your XAML visual tree while you're working in the XAML editor, right? So for example, my cursor is on grid right now. If I bring up my element combo box, it tells me what are my child of this current active element, what is its parent, and what are its peers. So I get that view in my element combo box. I can go and select an element. Let's say I can go and select a grid view, and my attribute combo box will start showing me all the attributes and properties which is set on this element. So let's say I want to go and see where my item template is. I can just go and select it, and the cursor directly goes into the editor to that location, right? So this is like full-fledged nav bar, which we have added for XAML editor as well, and we think it's going to be very useful when you are actually hand editing your XAML in Visual Studio. Now we have wired up my back button event, so let's run this application again. And let's try the scenario again for back button handling. So I will go into your cuisine. I will click on a recipe. Now I click on back button, and it takes me back to the cuisine page. I click the button again, and it takes me back to my application page. So I did a little bit of if-def code inside my shared project, and I was able to handle my back button navigation for the phone projects. I'm pretty sure a lot of developers in here also use Blend to actually design their UI and to create this pixel-perfect UI for your applications, for your Windows and Windows Phone application. So I'm happy to announce that Blend will also support universal applications. So what you can do is you can right-click on this project and say, Open in Blend. And the projects which were created in the Visual Studio, you can actually see the same project is also now open in Blend. You can go and work with all the XAML files, including the shared XAML files inside Blend. Since Blend doesn't have this concept of navbar, there's one slight difference, and that is that to change the context for your shared XAML files, you have to go to the device panel and then change the context using here. So here you can change the context to Windows and Windows Phone to see how your UI will look like on each platform. Other than that, all the features that Blend supports, like animation, visual states, template editing, resources, everything will also be supported for universal applications while you're working in Blend. So now let's actually go back to deck and quickly recap what some of the things that we have seen. So we saw the demo for universal apps. We looked at the shared projects. What shared project does, it allows you to actually share your code and assets between the two platforms in a universal application. The shared project itself does not have a binary output. You cannot build a shared project. All these commands are disabled because essentially what it is, it's just a container, and all the files inside the shared project are imported by your platform-specific project. What kind of items are supported in the shared project? Pretty much anything, and we already looked at it in demo. We looked at the conditional compilation constants. So if you're working on a C# application, you should use Windows_app and Windows_for_app for your if-def statement for writing platform-specific code. If you are a C++ native developer, then you can continue using your WinAPI family constants, which is WinAPI family_PC_app and WinAPI family_for_app for writing your platform-specific code in a shared project. We looked at the IntelliSense warning. What these warning indicates that these particular types, properties, or events are specific to a platform, and it doesn't exist on the other platform. We looked at the context switcher in the nav bar, which you can use to change your context while you're working in the shared project, and that drives the IntelliSense experience in the editor and the designer. We looked at quickly changing the startup projects using debug target dropdown, and as I mentioned, this is supported for all stored platforms, including Windows Phone, Silverlight, and Windows 8, and it's only enabled when you have more than one application in your solution. So now that was sharing between two versions of the platform in a universal application. But what if I have to share between n number of universal applications? As an example, I'm building two game applications, a Sudoku game app and a crossword game application, right? And I want to create a shared scoreboard service, which I want to use for both the universal applications. This is the place the concept of class library comes into handy, because what are class libraries? They're essentially the reusable components which you can use in multiple applications. So if you look at this slide, we looked at the left-hand stack, which was the shared project. But for managed developers, I'm pretty sure you're familiar with the concept of portable class library. What portable class library allows you right now, that it allows you to create a single binary which is targeting n number of platforms, right? So you can create one PCL, portable class library, that works for WPF, Silverlight, Windows Phone 8, and even if you're using Xamarin, you can use the same portable class library for iOS and Android applications. With the conversions and with the Windows Phone 8.1 converging to Windows 8.1, we are also improving the portable class libraries to now support WinRT and XAML when you are targeting the converged Windows 8.1 and Windows Phone 8.1 platforms. So let's actually go and take a look at a demo for portable class libraries. So I'm going to use my same Contour Cookbook application here. But if you see in the solution, the project structure has changed a little bit, right? I have my application project here. But for all the stuff that I expect to be reused across application, I have created a class library, which is a Windows 8.1 class library. If you right-click on this library and go to Properties, you will see a new section called Targeting. So if you click on Change, it brings up a dialog asking you which particular platforms you want to go and target. As I'm working on a universal application, I will go and select Windows Phone 8.1 and click OK. Once I do it, in the Solution Explorer, my class library has now switched to portable because it's targeting multiple platforms, Windows 8.1 and Windows Phone 8.1. I can go and rebuild this class library, and you will see that it works. And in this class library, I have my WinRT types as well as a shared resource dictionary. Now I will go and I can use the add platform to add the Windows Phone 8.1 project, but I will go and say add new project and select a new blank Windows Phone project and call this cookbook.windowsphone and create this. Once I've added this project, I will go to the add reference dialog and select my portable class library, which is cookbook helper. Because it is targeting Windows Phone 8.1 already, the add reference works, and I'm able to add this reference. As I did before, I have some phone-specific files, so I'm just going to go and add them. So I'm simply going to go and drag drop these files here. Yes, I want to override my XAML files and reload, and that's pretty much it. So what I have in my platform-specific Windows Phone 8.1 project is I have my navigation helper here because I'm using the hashif statement to handle the back button event handler. And because PCL is a single binary, it doesn't support the concept of if-def, right? So I have pushed that code inside a Windows Phone project. Also, I have my XAML pages, which are living inside my Windows Phone project. Now I will go and change my startup project to Windows Phone 8.1 and run this application. And if everything works, I have my same application now working on Windows Phone 8.1 using portable class library. So you have both the concept and both the approaches available. The recommendation will be that when you're working on sharing between two versions of your application on Windows 8.1 and Windows Phone 8.1, think about using shared projects. But if you want to share between n number of universal applications, then you should think about using class libraries. So now the interesting question is, what if I want to go and write some platform-specific code inside the class library itself? And what about the extension SDK authors? What's the story for them? So again, you should think about starting with PCL. But if you want to go and write some platform-specific code, we don't have a project template right now inside Visual Studio to support it. But we will be releasing a Visual Studio extension on VS Gallery, which will allow you to use the shared project for class libraries as well. So let's actually go and take a quick look of how that will work. So in a couple of days, and once this build ends, you will be seeing that a new Visual Studio extension on VS Gallery, which will support the shared projects. Once you have installed that, so let's go and actually create a Windows 8.1 class library first. So I will just say class library 1.windows. And I will add a Windows Phone class library. So I will say class library 1.windowsphone, create them. And after installing the Visual Studio extension, if you're going to go into the Add New Project dialog, in the language node, you will see empty shared project template. So you can actually go and use that. So I'll just call this as shared project and add this. Once you add this project, you can right-click on the references and use the add shared project reference command to actually go and add the imports in each of these DLLs. So you can go and say add project reference, this, and click OK. And at this point, you can start adding any file inside the shared project, and you can start using to build your DLL as well. So if you want to write any platform-specific code, you can go and add it inside the shared project, use #if, and that will work. If you want to go and reference an extension SDK for your DLL and everything, you can reference that in the platform-specific DLL projects, and that will work as well. So this Visual Studio extension will be available on download on VS Gallery. For C++ developers, since there is no concept of portable class library, it also uses the shared project to actually do the source sharing for the DLLs and Venarti components. So if you go into the new project dialog and go into the C++ node and the universal apps, you will see a DLL. So if you go and create it, you will see a very similar concept to what you have in the application, where you have a platform-specific Windows 8 DLL, platform-specific Windows Phone 8.1 DLL, and a shared project which you can use to share your source between the two DLLs and make it work. So that actually covers pretty much most of the class libraries and the Venarti or WinMD story for universal applications. Now, since we have a little bit of time, what I would like to demo next is some of the XAML authoring features that we have for Windows Phone 8.1 applications. Most of these features were already enabled for Windows 8.1 application and was shipped as a part of Visual Studio 2013 RTM. But I will just going to, and I'm happy to announce that these all features are being carried forwarded to also support on Windows Phone 8.1. So you're going to go and take a quick look at some of these features. To do it, I'm going to go and use my same Contoso Cookbook application. And I will start with my Windows Phone project. And I will go into split view. The very first feature that I'm going to go and demo is the IntelliSense for resources inside the XAML editor. So if you're working in your editor, and let's say you have to type something in IntelliSense. So let's delete this and say static resource. And as soon as I bring up the IntelliSense pop-up, you will see now the IntelliSense actually tells me what exactly are the resources I can use for my style property in the text block. Since we already know that you are in the context of a text block, we filter all the styles with the target type text block to give you the right list. So if I was using title text block style, I can just use that in the IntelliSense itself, and it works. Similarly, if you are working in data binding, so let's go into my hub section 2. I have my data context set here. So if I go into my binding and I start typing in using IntelliSense, I say binding. The binding itself, the IntelliSense itself will give me all the properties that are defined on my data context right here in my IntelliSense pop-up, and I can use that while I'm building my Windows Phone 8.1 application. So I will say binding image path, and boom, and it works in Designer as well. So all these features were already enabled for Windows 8.1, and we are bringing that forward for Windows Phone 8.1. These were some of the top-rated features on the user voice, and it was so much, like it makes you super, super productive when you're working in XAML editor. The next feature I'm going to go and demo is the go-to definition, or F12, right? The logic, the principle we are using for go-to definition is you can pretty much go and select anything in the XAML editor and say go-to definition, and it will take you to the source of where that particular type, property, and event is coming from. As an example, I can go and select the same binding property which I just added. I can right-click on this and say go-to definition, and it directly takes me to the code where this property is defined, and it tells me where it is coming from. I can also click on go-to definition for style resources, So I have my text block style selected here. I can press F12, and it takes me directly to the location where this style is actually defined. And in this case, it's coming from generator.xaml, which is the platform's generator.xaml, and which defines this particular style. Thank you. I can also go and say go to definition on any particular type. Let's say I have image. I can say go to definition on that, and it opens up that type in the object browser, tells me which namespace it is coming from, what are the properties which are supported for on this particular type, etc. So pretty much you can use go to definition anywhere in the editor, and that will work. The next feature I'm going to go and demo is the device panel support inside the designer. So as you will see that in Windows Phone 8.1, it's going to support huge number of devices of different sizes, right? And when you're working on your application, you need to make sure that you have a rich and polished experience for your app on every form factor. Right? And to do that, you really don't need to go and run your application on each or test your application on each device. What you can do is you can use the designer and the device panel inside the designer. So if you go and bring up the display combo box inside the designer, it actually showcases all the different display sizes which we support in the designer and which are supported by Windows Phone 8.1. It tells you the resolution, and it also tells you the scale factor that it is using. So if, for example, I want to see how my item page will look like on a 6-inch device, which is 1080 by 1920, I can go and select it, and if I do fit all, you will see that I'm seeing more content inside the designer. Because a 6-inch device, I will see more content and able to just see that inside the designer how my UI will look like for each particular resolution using the device panel. If you are using the accent brush, right? So phone has this cool concept of accent brushes. So let's say I'm going to use an accent brush for my text block and say static resource, phone accent brush. Right? Once you set it, you can go and change the accent brush inside the device panel itself and see how your designer, how your UI will respond to this particular accent brush. Right? So you don't have to go and run your application, go into the emulator or device, change the accent brush, and go back to your application and see it. You can directly do that for your UI inside the designer. If you want to see how your application looks like on different theme, let's say how my page looks like on light theme, I can just change that there, and designer actually shows you exactly. We are all using the system resources here, all the resources which are used by the platform at runtime, so you're really getting the right design time experience for these. Finally, I want to showcase a couple of features inside Blend for Windows Phone 8.1 application, and which will also work for universal applications. The very first feature I'm going to go and showcase is the rulers and guides. So when you're working on a 5-star application, what actually makes your application, one of the criteria for making your application 5-star is the really polished UI, the pixel-perfect UI, and a beautiful UI for your app. In a lot of cases, we actually work with designers to create this polished UI, right? So designers create this designer compositions, and then they give you, like, this particular control should go and have this particular margin. By the way, the text block text should be this, and the margin value should be this. And then developers actually mimic that inside the XAML to create the UI. To improve this workflow, we introduced the concept of guides in Blend. So what you can do, you can start creating the guides for your pages inside Blend. You can create a guide by pulling it down from top. And let's say I want to create this guide at 50 pixels from top. So I can do that. I can also drag a guide from left and say I want to create this guide at, say, 15 pixels from left. I can create another guide, and let's say I'm doing this at 145 pixels from top. So what it allows is basically it allows you to create a wireframe for your UI inside Blend. Right? So you can create exactly the layout you want for your page inside Blend. Once you have created this UI, the layout, you can go to, say, View, Manage Guide, Save Guides, and save all these values into a file with .guide extension. Then you can re-import these guides on different pages, or you can hand it over to your developer to say, these are the guides, import them inside the XAML pages, and then make sure your application is actually working with respect these guide values. What also we do is we support snapping to these guides. So if I have a control, you can see as I'm moving it near the guide, it allows me to snap to these guides inside Blend. So I can do that to allow me to create the exact margin values which my designer intended me to use. So this is the guide features that we have added for Windows 8.1 and Windows Phone 8.1 applications inside Blend. One final thing, a lot of you actually use behaviors. So what are behaviors? Behaviors allows you to add interactivity in your application without writing code. So this behavior concept was introduced for, I think, the WPF applications initially for Blend, and we supported the behaviors for Windows 8.1 application, and we are bringing that behaviors for Windows Phone 8.1 applications as well. So as part of Visual Studio Update 2, we will be shipping a Windows Phone SDK for Blend, which will support all these behaviors, and you can use them in your XAML application to add interactivity without writing code. So that's pretty much it. Let's go back to our deck. So we looked at all these features. We talked about IntelliSense in data bindings and resources. We talked about go-to definition in the XAML editor. We looked at using device panel, which I think is very, very powerful for making sure your UI works correctly on different display sizes and to make sure your UI works correctly with different themes, high contrast, and accent brushes. We looked at behaviors briefly, and we talked about rulers and guides. Finally, we have few related sessions. So some of my friends in Windows, Jerry Nixon and Douglas Holland, are doing a session on Windows runtime for Windows Phone developers. I think so this session is scheduled for tomorrow. And what they're going to go and talk about is very specifically about the experience of taking a Windows 8.1 application onto Windows Phone 8.1 and what kind of issues you will run into and what you should do to handle those issues. We have added a huge, many diagnostic tools for phone applications in Visual Studio. You looked at Kevin Gallo's demo today. He showed some of the CPU sampling and the memory tool. And you can take a deep dive into these diagnostic tools in a session by Dan Teller, which is session 578. Finally, we would love to know how you feel about the user experience while you're working in a universal application or in general while you're working with Windows and Windows Phone application in Visual Studio. To do that, I have my friend Jessica Rich. She is at the back, and she would love to actually interact with you to talk more about the user experience and to get your feedback. We also have a one-on-one expert session for UX research scheduled for tomorrow from 3:30 to 6:30. So if you get a chance, please stop by, and we would love to talk about it. So that concludes my session. I'm open for questions. If you please be loud. If you can, please come to the mic and ask your questions, and I will try to answer them. Yep. Thanks.
So a question that I have is a lot of us use a lot of tools that work with the object code, like code coverage or static analysis tools or weavers. How does that work with the sort of shared projects and what's being done to sort of support those sorts of workflows?
So the question is, they are using some tools like code coverage and static analysis, how these actually work with your universal apps, specifically with the shared projects. So all those tools should continue to work with shared project as well. If you talk about the core implementation, in the way the shared project is working, it's actually using the MS Build imports. So if you run the code on your application project, all the files inside the shared project should already be included as a part of that application, and those tools should continue to work. As an example, we have the unit testing and the coded UI test inside Visual Studio itself, and all those particular tools work with universal apps beautifully. You don't have any issues with them. So all those tools should continue to work.
What about items that create a sub-item?
Yes, so the coverage will be per application, right? So you are going to get, the shared project will probably get coverage for both the platforms. If you have your conditional code inside the shared project, then you will get the specific behavior for a Windows and Windows Phone project. So it will be conditional based on that. Yep. Do you have any more?
Add an extension to that. Like, so if your item has like a sub-item that's created by, say, like a custom tool or something like that, how would that interact with it being in a shared project? Or is that just something that you shouldn't try and do?
Can you repeat that again? I didn't get that, actually.
So like, say you've got a custom tool that generates like a sub item, like a child item for a parent item, and maybe that interacts differently depending on which platform.
It shouldn't. It shouldn't. In some ways, if whatever was exactly in most of the cases, if it was working in your standalone Windows 8.1 application, it should continue to work with shared projects as well.
Okay.
If it doesn't, I would recommend you. I don't know exactly the scenarios, but if you can give it a try, if it doesn't work, send me an email. I will be happy to engage with you what exactly.
And just like 20,000 foot view, like is this intended for use in other scenarios other than universal apps? So like say you wanted to have a few class libraries that are sharing files in this way.
Yep.
Would that work? Is that a good idea?
So
can you still do the context switching, for example?
So the question is, should we consider using shared projects outside the converged Windows 8.1, Windows Phone 8.1 platforms, or should I use multiple shared projects? The guidance is no.
Okay.
The current feature is supported for only the converged platforms. So you should, anything you try outside that is pretty much you are trying into an unsupported area, which tools have not been tested on and will not be
because,
supported.
for example, some of these things like being able to switch context to which project a shared file is being loaded for would be very useful to have just period. Say like even if you had a linked file in two projects.
So for example, this feature for context switcher will work for linked files as well.
Okay.
So we have, by default, by doing this work, we have improved the linked file experience as well. And you will be able to use context switcher in linked files as well.
Well, that's very good at least.
Yeah, so that is there.
It would be nice to have some of those other, like, just this concept of having those imported files in multiple projects that reference
exactly.
that. So.
That's a good feedback, definitely something we have to consider. But currently,
that would be very, very good if we had that.
Awesome.
Right.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yes, please.
Yeah, in the keynote this morning, it looked like they had a Xbox One component to this whole universal project. Did I mistake that? My colleagues thought the same thing. Was there an Xbox One universal app component coming?
The question is whether there was an Xbox One. I think so there's a whole session on that, which is actually talking about the supporting Xbox as well as a part of it. I have actually not covered that, so I'm actually don't know much about it.
Okay.
But yeah, it looks like from the demo, it was working.
All right, thank you.
Yep, thank you.
So I was just wondering, what's the guidance if we've already got a solution that contains a Windows 8.1 app and a Windows 8 phone app with a PCL library? So what's the guidance for taking that and moving it into a universal app?
So the question is, what if I already have a Windows 8.1 application and a Windows Phone 8 app with a bunch of class libraries, and how you want to go and take that forward into a universal application structure? So universal app doesn't work with Windows Phone 8, right? So you can definitely start migrating. It really also depends on what your end goal is. If you really think that you want to push your Windows Phone 8 application also on Windows Phone 8.1, what I would recommend is you do that as separately retargeting your Windows Phone 8 to Windows Phone 8.1, and then actually use the universal applications and shared projects to actually start sharing the code between them. As it stands right now, you won't be able to use shared projects to share between Windows 8 and Windows Phone 8.
Right, so basically then kind of drop the Windows Phone 8 project and then just add the 8.1 shared project.
Yes. So it would be interesting. I think so you should also attend Sam Jarvin's session on which is going to talk about Windows Phone Silverlight 8.1. So it will be interesting of what kind of necessity is it. If you want to keep if you want to go and do an immediate update for your application, it might be worth considering the Silverlight route. If not, then I would really recommend you to move to a Windows Phone 8.1 and then use universal apps to actually share between the code between them.
Yeah, and then one other thing that this kind of leads into, as far as like your navigation and everything. So if you're putting specific views for the phone as opposed to the Windows Store app into each of those projects, I'm assuming that you need to have that same view name defined in both, and then it's going to use whichever one, whichever project it is. Is that?
Yes, so if you're saying that if you have the views with the same name defined in the platform and the shared project, is that the question, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so if you have the same views name defined in the platform and the shared project, normally what will happen, the head will win, the platform projects will win, and that will actually be copied into as a part of your Apex, for Apex. So that would be it. So it's simple rule. In case of file conflicts between the platform project and the shared project, the platform project wins.
Thank you.
Sure. Yep.
I'm a little concerned about the shared frameworks that I use currently on Windows 8.1, such as Prism for Windows Runtime and Telerik controls. What's the story about the complexity for the conversion over to more of universal controls and frameworks? Should I hold my breath, or should I be figuring, roll my own, it'll be 2 years?
Okay, so the question is, what about some of the other frameworks like Prism and Telerik, where you're using your controls from Telerik, and how you're going to use them in the universal applications? So as I mentioned, I would expect that companies like Telerik, Component One, Infragistics will be shipping their Windows Phone 8.1 SDKs as well pretty shortly. And they will also probably will be using the same controls which works on Windows. They will be supporting them on Windows Phone 8.1 as well. So once you get the extension SDKs, you can go and add the reference in your individual platform project, and then you can start using those particular controls. So I would expect all of them will continue, all these scenarios will continue to work in a universal app structure as well. Does it make sense? So I would expect Telerik to come up with an announcement probably for supporting Windows Phone 8.1, because they already have an SDK on Windows 8.1.
So it's not too complex if they keep the same names for the control types.
If you have, like, for example, if I have a Telerik combo box, if I have putting it in the same namespace, in the same type name, in the same namespace, then it will just work. You can use in the shared project, and it will render in Windows. It will render in Windows way. In Windows Phone, it will render in Windows Phone way, and that will work. So it's not like very complicated. That's the way a lot of system controls have been written as well. So that it's going to work. Yep. Yep.
I think it's a very simple question, but all the demos and the keynotes today, I've seen Windows 8.1 be the starter app, and then you add the shared Windows Phone 8.1. Can you go the opposite way?
Yes, you can.
Okay.
So if you for some reason, if you start with just Windows Phone 8.1, you can also right-click and say Add Windows 8.1 and add the shared project and go that route as well.
Based on how everybody was doing it
Yeah,
today.
both ways are supported.
Right.
Yep. Yes.
Hi, Justin Angel. I'm wondering if there's a story for different XAML for shared control. So let's say I've got a user control. I want to do the equivalent of if-else for some C#, but in XAML. Is there a story for that there?
So
a control that doesn't exist at all?
Yeah. The question is there any story for doing conditional code inside the XAML? Unfortunately, no, not at this point. So definitely something we have heard feedback, and we are looking into it. Thank you.
Thanks.
Yep.
We have a project right now that has C++ code for Win32, WinRT, and WinPhoneRT. And I was wondering if there's any way to leverage this to have a shared project for all three of those, or if it would only be limited to RT and PhoneRT.
So the question is that they have a solution where using Win32, WinRT, and Windows Phone, right? Again, at this point, shared projects are only supported for converged applications. So you have to find a way and route of kind of separating it out and try using it. But unfortunately, the shared project is not supported. It will not work with Win32 and other platforms right now. Yeah.
I wanted to ask about the top navigation bar.
.NET?
Top navigation bar.
Okay.
How will it be handled in Windows Phone?
So top navigation bar, Windows Phone doesn't have this concept of top bar. Actually, if you have attended Tim's sessions, he clarified that app bar is not supported at all in Windows Phone. You have to use command bar. So, and that is some of the cases, right? If you are using in your page, you're using both top and bottom, then you will end up creating different XAML pages which will live in your platform-specific project. But rest of the content, you can actually refactor them into a user control and use them, because Windows Phone doesn't have this concept of top command bar.
But for example, I need the command bar, the top command bar, I need it for navigation in my Windows 8 application. So I'll need to have specific pages for all.
Yes, you have to have either the specific pages, or you go into a route where you can actually go and hide the command bar in the code when you're running on phone. But I think so in a lot of cases, you refactoring your XAML into reusable components like user control, which will be very useful, and just creating the base pages inside the platform-specific project will be a better recommendation. Yep. That's pretty much it. Thanks for your time. Thanks, guys.